They have followed in the practices of their Canaanite and even Philistine brethren to a little degree, where they have set up worship centers on every high hill under every green tree. Remember, we read that a couple weeks ago? That's from this section here. And so as we're looking at that kind of theological context, we better know the tools that God uses in order to accomplish his theological purposes. So God very frequently talks about Assyria as a tool of his own hand. Isaiah chapter 10, the king of Assyria is like kind of puffing out his chest, and he's like, have you seen what I've done? I've gone through and conquered that city. I did that one. I leveled those people. I exiled them. I deported them, put them up on stakes, and all of these amazing military conquests, because that's what Assyria does, is they brag about their military conquests. And God's like, that's nice, sweetie. That's good that you feel good about yourself. But it's not you. It's me who has done it. So because you have become high and mighty in your own head, I'm going to show you what high and mighty really looks like. And so God humbles Assyria, and we'll hopefully have a chance to get there, where God kind of shows Assyria where they actually sit in the scope of world history. So, you down with that? All right, we're going to head on this journey. Also, keep in front of you these maps here. Let me explain them to you so you know what you are looking at. So the map, or the side of the paper that has just two maps on it, the top map is the kind of growth of the Assyrian kingdom. So you see where it says Assyria, kind of right in the middle, upper middle of that map. And that's the central hub of the empire of Assyria, but you can see that it does not stop there. It continues to grow, and during this period of expansion that we'll talk about, they expand their kingdom with each successive king. And so this map shows you kind of the expanding area and the expanding influence that the empire of Assyria had during this time. The bottom map on that page shows the route of the exile, of the exiled people of the northern kingdom of Israel, following their route in 2 Kings chapter 17. Flip that page over. We have a kind of close-in map of the region right around Jerusalem. This is where one of the kings of Assyria, Sennacherib, came down into Israel, the land of Israel, and attacked the southern kingdom. We'll talk about that. And then finally, if we get there, to be able to talk about the Babylonians and the southern kingdom of Judah's exile. That's what those bottom two maps are about. So you have a little bit of an overview of where we're going, and let's jump in. If you want to, I'd encourage you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 15. It'll be a little while before we get there. Yes, please, let me get that. It'll be a little while before we get to 2 Kings chapter 15, but we're going to spend some time there. And if you want to also, we might have a chance to jump over to Isaiah and talk about the virgin birth, if you might desire to get there. So, all right. So to start out with, the land of Assyria, as you can see in that map that I just showed you, is literally the land between the rivers. Which rivers are we talking about? Anybody know? The Tigris and the Euphrates. This is modern day Iraq. So I was even on Google Maps today and just zooming in, and you can find, even on Google Maps in a land like Iraq, you can find these architectural and sites. Archaeological. That's the word I was searching for. Thank you, guys. These archaeological sites, so you can tour a little bit the ruins of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and you can see some of these things. What we know of Assyria, however, only has come to light within the last 150 years or so. About 1850 is when the empire of Assyria really came to light in two different ways. One was there started to be some archaeological discoveries, some palaces, clay documents, and all kinds of things. These types of archaeological discoveries were being made around this time by the British. And so if you want to see any of the things that we talk about tonight, you don't go to Assyria or Iraq. You can go to Britain and see them in the British Museum in London. So that was number one. Number two, there was a discovery of a... So the language that is prominent, written language that's prominent at this time and in this region of the ancient world is called Cuneiform. So I meant to get a video for you. I'm sorry about that. But if you've ever seen kind of these like random weird triangle shapes, I might actually have one. Yeah, so you can see it on this tablet right here. This is Cuneiform, and this is the first kind of written form of language that we have in human history recorded. Is each of these little markings that you see here, so like just a little thing right there, or just a little thing right there, is somewhat the equivalent to our letters, our alphabet. And so this is a stela that was written and records some of the military conquests of King Sargon II. So you can pull up your, timeline and find Sargon II on there. So he's kind of late in Assyria's history. But we found one from the people who conquered the Assyrians, the Babylonians. And there's a stela that they have that in Babylon that has been found that records some events in 3 different languages. So it would be similar to this thing where we have kind of 3 different sides. This one's actually 6-sided. But we have 3 different languages that are all written the same, but use different words and different alphabetic combinations. And they're written kind of side by side. And so around 1850, this British scholar was able to decode, to take these 3 things and figure out what actually was being said in these inscriptions. And what that did is it opened up just thousands of documents to be able to read from this ancient texts that they were able to read. And most of them are just kind of like mundane kind of things, like, honey, please pick this up from the grocery store kinds of things, receipts and that kind of stuff. But many of them are on some of these just massive walls that are recording the history of Assyria. They're recording the exploits of the kings because they were excellent historians. They wanted to record things that happened, especially when they went well for them. Okay, so one of the things that we know about Assyrian scribes, the people who would do the writing, is that they didn't like to tell bad news. So if we know from elsewhere in history that a king of Assyria was routed in a battle, that will show up nowhere in Assyria's library of texts, okay? It might be the case that they'll just kind of like gloss over it and like, everything is good up until this point, and then something else good happened, okay? Or they might just omit that period in their history altogether, or sometimes they would just outright lie. Like, no, we know that you lost that battle mightily, but the most detailed account of any single battle that we have in Assyrian history is actually an outright lie. It is just a complete fabrication, and we have evidence that it's just, you just made that up and made up those numbers and how well you slaughtered the people and all those kinds of things. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm not going to get into that. But yes. So sometimes we have to take the text that we have from Assyria with a little bit of a grain of salt. Additionally, the greatest evidence we have of Babylonian culture is from libraries in Assyria. So just kind of similar to how we've learned about Canaanite culture from libraries up north in Ugarit, we have the same kind of thing happening here where Babylonian culture, the kings of Assyria were like, we spend so much time doing war things. We don't really have time to develop our own culture. Let's go steal the Babylonians' library and bring it to our palaces and make that our culture. So that's essentially what they did, is they went through Babylon and they stole their documents and brought them all back and then formed their own library out of what they found in Babylon and said, yeah, this sounds pretty good. This is, we're more or less here. So all of that to say that we're still developing an understanding of who Assyria was, how they worked, but the things that we know from Scripture mesh in very well and very interestingly with some of the things that we know from extra biblical literature, from these tablets and things in Assyria. So let's talk just briefly about their kind of culture and lifestyle. We're not going to spend very much time on the religious aspects because Assyria's religion had little to no effect on Israelite religion. The main god of Assyria was the god Ashur, and Ashur, the name of that god, never appears in the Old Testament. So Israel was not tempted by the god Ashur even in the slightest. Israel, instead, we know, was tempted very much by all the Canaanite deities and everything that was going on in their immediate vicinity. So where Assyria really comes to play in the Old Testament is in their military might, strength, and power. The way that they are conquering people and making people kind of like cower in fear from a national standpoint. So as you can see on your map, Assyria is just kind of like, it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? It's modern day Iraq, if I didn't say that already. And there's nothing really to define it. There's no clear borders. There's a mountain range that kind of hugs it on the northern end. There's a desert that kind of encroaches upon it from the southern end. But other than that, there's nothing to define, here's where you stop and you start. Here's where Assyria stops and Babylon starts. So because of that, and it was also along some pretty significant trade routes as people followed the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to go all the way from Europe to China. So people are constantly passing through this region. So what happens to your culture when you have people constantly passing through your region? You don't have a really set, defined culture of your own other than we defend ourselves. We defend ourselves against any people who might try to impose their will upon us. So that's what Assyria became known for, is they became known for warfare. They were a people who practiced warfare at every turn they could. So one historian said they're a kaleidoscope of peoples, of languages and culture, that as people come in and out, Babylon moves in and out, that they just kind of assimilate culture, they assimilate religion to some degree, and they don't have that kind of defined sense of we're this and you're that. Instead, they're like, yeah, we're all kind of loosey-goosey about who we are, but we know who we are as a people who we like war. We like to assert our dominance throughout the known world. There's three kind of main time periods, and you can see this reflected in chart 11, the Neo Assyrian Empire. But before I get to that, chart 8. Yeah, so on the other side, chart 8, you can see kind of some of the main things that are happening during this time. So we go from, on the very left-hand side, we go from the date 922 all the way to the date 722. So the period of 200 years is all we're talking about here. At 922, this is where Solomon's kingdom splits in two. After Solomon dies, his son takes the southern kingdom of Judah, and the northern kingdom with Jeroboam splits off, and they become two separate nations. So from there, you can see kind of some of the important events and kings who reign in both Judah and then Israel. We see some of the important prophets like Elijah, Elisha, Amos, Isaiah, etc. Then we see Aram, Damascus, and we'll get into why they're important on this scene in just a moment. And then on the far right column, we see some of the main kings of Assyria. So Assyria is split kind of generally into three time periods. There's Old Assyria. That's not who we think of when we think of Assyria. There's Middle Assyria. That's not who we really think about either. And there's Neo Assyrian. That's where we're talking. That's where we're going to spend most of our time tonight. Like I said, there's little known about this people before the time about 2000 BC. So before that time frame, we're kind of just like guessing at who these people are. We know there were people in the region, but we don't really know who they are or how they developed down into the nation we know as Assyria. But from the Middle Assyrian time period onward, war just became their way of life. It was who they are from that time on. There was little time or opportunity to develop themselves culturally. And in this Old Assyrian time period, that's the most ancient of Assyria, we're talking up until about 1000 BC. So everything up until 1000 BC, we're kind of like, it's not all that important for what we're talking about tonight. Middle Assyrian goes from about 1000 or 1200 BC up until the middle of the 900s BC. So this is where some of these first Assyrian rulers start to really assert themselves and become who we know of as Assyria. They start to kind of develop that warlike mentality. They start to become known for being people who are just kind of brutal, become known for people who are on the war path, looking to conquer and expand their territory. But the Neo-Assyrian period goes from 934 on through the end of their kingdom, which is in 612 BC. So what do you notice about the date 934 and the date of Solomon's split of the kingdom, 922? It's not a hard question. They're very close together, right? Things are happening in this time period, politically, sociopolitically. Like, just things are starting to move. And that's where Aram, Damascus also comes on to the scene, because Assyrian has, in the Neo-Assyrian Empire, now you can flip over to the chart 11. In the Neo-Assyrian period, there are two kings who start out, Nasrpol, sorry, and Shalmaneser number 3. So two kings who are strong. Then we have a period of weakling kings, and then finally a resurgence of strong kings. And these are the kings that we know about from the Bible primarily, as those last 5 kings, starting with Tiglath-Pileser and going through Ashurbanipal. So in this initial period, the first period of Neo-Assyria, we have these two prominent kings, and the one who we actually see a little bit of in the Bible is Shalmaneser III. So Shalmaneser III is this guy here on the left. So you can see he feels pretty good about himself. Any king in Assyria, they have absolute authority. They can do just about anything they want. And the monarchy is passed down by hereditary means. So my son becomes king, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And I am the unquestioned authority. The only thing that they had to kind of keep in mind was that they were serving at the will of their god Asher. So throughout their ancient documents, very often, over and over again, they have that so-and-so, the king, did this thing by the will of the god Asher. I did this because Asher told me to do this. Now, it's very similar to what we've talked about the last couple weeks with the Canaanites and the Philistines, in that when the God tells me to do something, how do we know that the God tells me to do that? We might cut open an animal and read its entrails, pull out its liver and look at the lines. It's the same kinds of things in Assyria that we talked about with Canaanites. But additionally, the Assyrians might look at the stars and read the stars. But essentially, the king can kind of they can stack the deck in their favor. And the God's telling me to do the thing, right? Right? He's telling me to do the thing. Let's go do the thing, okay? And so this is Shalmaneser III here, and he has the one place that he really intersects with biblical history is he has this black obelisk, is what this is called. So you see it's four-sided, and each of these kind of depictions here tells a story of a great thing that the king did. One of those stories is right here, okay? That's this top one right here. So this is that. So what do we see here? Raise your hand what do you think you see in this depiction? Go ahead, Molly. We do see King Jehu bowing down. Very nice. So this is Jehu, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, bowing down, paying tribute to Shalmaneser. So early on in the northern kingdom's reign, so we have Shalmaneser is 859 to 824. So less than 100 years after the northern kingdom becomes a kingdom, they're paying tribute and bowing down to the big baddies of Assyria, okay? So that just sets the scene for where we're going to go. But we see on our timeline that immediately after Shalmaneser is dead, and even during his reign a little bit, he's an old man, and he says, I can't go out to the battlefields all the way out to Israel. That's a long ways to walk. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to appoint a couple of governors who can be my emissaries as they go, and you guys go and do my bidding. Well, these governors saw that Shalmaneser is about to die, and I'm not so sure I want his son to become king. I'd kind of like to become king. That's a pretty good deal to have nobody who comes against you and says, no, you can't do that. So they start battling. So if you see on the left under the state of Assyrian power, and we see number 2, internal unrest is one of the reasons for this period of weakness. That's where that unrest came from, is these people inside of Shalmaneser's reign who are doing a little bit of infighting and trying to control the government themselves. That's what also caused this weak central government. But then they also had problems with the kingdom of Urartu. You can see it on the top map. Urartu is all the way to the north up in the mountains. And so Urartu sees this kind of infighting, and they decide, now's our time. We'll live up in the mountains. We'd kind of like to get closer and closer to this fertile crescent. That's what this region of the world's called. We'd like to get closer to the places where we can grow crops and do all the things that our little hearts desire. So they start moving closer and closer and closer to Assyria territory. And instead of those Assyrian kings reaching far and wide out to Israel and Babylon and those areas, they have to deal with the immediate threat of these people coming down from the north. But with Tiglath-Pileser, or Pul as the Bible calls him, we have in 745 a complete reversal of this weakness. So Tiglath-Pileser at this time, when he comes on the scene and into power, he decides we need to do something about this weakness that we are going through. So during that time of weakness, Aram Damascus, so back on chart 8, Aram Damascus sees the weakness of Assyria. So Aram Damascus is just northeast a little bit of where Israel is. And they're like, I see an opportunity. Assyria is weak. Egypt is weak. There's no superpower on the scene right now. We can start to assert our dominance. We can start to become the who's who of baddie empires in the ancient world, okay? So Aram Damascus starts forming some coalitions of people or of different tribes and groups that anytime some bigger empire is going to try to come onto the scene, they're like, we've got a group of people, of kings, of cities, of armies that can rise up against that. And that's going to definitely come into play with the fall of Assyria, or the fall of the northern kingdom in just a moment. So Aram Damascus has started to assert their influence on the scene, and Tiglath-Pileser comes into power and decides, I need to restructure our kind of provincial system, because what we're doing with all of these like little governors who think that they're big stuff, that's not working. We need to centralize power, and I'm going to be the hand that hits hard for everybody. So Tiglath-Pileser, Pul, comes on and decides, I am the final authority on everything. And he sought to expand his territory. He built the first professional standing army ever, okay? So including chariots, including cavalry, including, like, these guys are ready to go to war at the moment's notice. They're not just doing, like, every once in a while we'll go out and see if anybody wants to pick a fight. No, we're taking the fight to them every single year. Every year when the spring rains fall off and it starts to dry up, we're taking our army out and we are marching, and we are exacting tribute from these smaller nations that we have conquered in the past. We're making sure that everybody who says that they're doing what they're supposed to do, that they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. So Tiglath-Pileser starts this kind of new process for all of these kind of conquered states. Now, during this time, you can see on that first map again, so Tiglath-Pileser is the yellow. So where do you notice the yellow is in an important spot on our top map here? Right around our land of Israel, right? So we have the bluish, purplish area that Shalmaneser III had done, and then we have that period of weakness, and then finally Tiglath-Pileser comes and says, no, we're not shrinking anymore. We're going to expand the territory. So he expands northward, expands eastward over into Babylon, and then expands down southwestward into the land of Israel and Palestine. So that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time pretty much here tonight. Now, when Assyria went on their warpath, they had extremely brutal tactics. Let me see here. So you can see right up here, this is one of those reliefs that have been found in Assyria, and now it's in the British Museum. If you want to go see it yourself, you can do that. There's a copy of it in the Israel Museum as well. But you see human bodies that are just stuck on poles, right? That's a pretty brutal picture, isn't it? And this is a picture that they have placed, I'll show you where it comes, in just a celebration of an astounding victory in Israel. So these are Israelite citizens who are staked up on these poles. And they are found in this massive relief wall here. So this guy, let's see here. I forgot to look and see. Does anybody see where that was from? So that guy, I can't remember where it is, but it's on there. I promise you. Anyways, but we have, so you see spears and shields, you see armor, helmets, and those things. This is Tiglath-Pileser right here with the people who are just flooding to him with their tribute, right? So the king would actually be the one who is leading his army. He doesn't sit back in his palace in Assyria. The king of Assyria, he goes out with his army. He's not necessarily always fighting in battle, although Sargon II actually died in battle. But he's going out with his army so that when the people are conquered, he's the one that they have to kind of bring their tribute to, hang their head in shame, and say, "Oh, mighty Tiglath-Pileser, here's your tribute and everything that you ever desire." So this is just one massive battle scene that we have here on this wall. How big is this, Molly, do you think, in person? 50 feet long is what she said, okay? So, I mean, it's at least as double that screen probably. Yeah. It is a massive, massive wall that, again, has just been like taken out of the palace and transported over to Britain. But depicting these wonderful military victories for the people of Assyria. So Tiglath-Pileser is the one who kind of starts this process of like genuine brutality with their conquering missions. And when they came upon a people who they have conquered, there are a couple of options that those nations have. One, your first option is to say, "Oh, mighty Assyria, you have defeated us soundly, and we just give everything to you." So, if that's the case, if you're cooperative, Assyria probably will let you as the king live, and you actually will get to stay king. You'll actually get to stay in power, kind of business as usual, except for the fact that at least once a year, we're coming around with our army, and you are going to pay pretty much everything you have in tribute to us. And that's the price you pay for us not squashing you like a bug. And that you're privileged to be able to pay that to us. Now, if you decide as a ruler that I want to not quite be quite so cooperative and I want to hold a little bit of rebellion within me, they might strip that local leader from his office, probably will kill him, and then they'll install their own leader from within your ranks. So like, this person seems like he's good and responsive to Assyrian power, and that person will become the leader, and he's a puppet for Assyria, and he will pay the tribute and give everything that you have as a city to Assyria. You'll follow their rules and laws and all that. But if you decide like, I really don't want to be cooperative with this Assyrian overlord, I'm not happy with them, Assyria will come in and they will just obliterate your local government. They'll decide nobody who had any position of power is going to get to remain here, and instead we'll bring somebody from the capital city, Nineveh, to come and be our little overlord of this city, and they will be cruel in that. The worst possible outcome is if you absolutely will not do what Assyria says, will not pay tribute, and if you rebel and start forming a coalition with other people, other nations, that's when the big hammer comes, and we're going to take you out of your land. We're going to exile your people. We'll take at least half of your population, if not more, and we will physically deport them elsewhere. So that's what happens to the northern kingdom of Israel. So that's this bottom map here. So you can follow kind of the route of deportation is the green arrow here. So the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, got deported out and ended up in some areas in Assyria. Up in, you can see kind of the green shaded area. That's where the Israelites were resettled. And you could be sent as far away as Media, which nobody even knows where Media is. It's way up in the mountains, and it's just Timbuktu, okay? So you never know where you're going to be going, but you can know that it's going to be bad. So we see some evidence of that in some of these kind of faraway places. We see evidence that there's an Israelite community that formed way out in the boonies, okay? But within a generation, maybe two, all elements of Israelite culture, language, religion are just lost to history. And those people just become assimilated into Assyria or whoever it is that they are living among at that time. And they just lose every bit of unique identity that they had. So that's what exile means. It wasn't, exile for the northern kingdom especially was very different from what it was for the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom got to return. They got to, the Persian king Darius came in and he allowed those exiles to return. But not everybody. I mean, they've been living there for 70 years. So many of them have just grown up and we're Persians now. So they don't decide to go back. I'll get to you in just a moment. And so what happens for them, but Nehemiah and a small select group is allowed to enter back into the land. That's not the case for the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom just disappears from the political scene. And what they did for the land doesn't just sit empty. As you can see the brown arrow and the purple arrow on here, kind of a dashed line arrows. They have people from Babylon and from Syria who come and they resettle the land and turn the land into a completely new colony with new people who live there who have no connection to each other or to the land. And the goal of that is to squash out rebellion. Because if these people, they can't even talk to each other. They don't speak the same language. So if they can't speak the same language, they for sure can't rise up against us, Assyria. So yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So she said that the Assyria essentially took out the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Because in the southern kingdom, we have Judah and Benjamin, and the northern kingdom is everyone else. And it's that everyone else who got sent out into the wandering wilderness of nothingness and just became part of everybody else, part of Assyrian culture or Median culture or Persian culture. Whoever they ended up living among, that's who they were. Interestingly, the southern kingdom, when it was deported, there was a select group who ended up down in Egypt. And you see at the bottom of this map on the backside of that page, it says Elephantine. So we have a number of documents that come from Elephantine that talk about the southern kingdom's exile was really this moment that spurred them on to something new and something greater. So everything that we've been talking about with the northern kingdom and their tendency to integrate with Canaanite culture, that just went out the window as soon as the northern kingdom was exiled. But the southern kingdom, there was a group of those southern kingdom peoples who, when they came back, they recognized, we screwed up. We've got to change the way that we're doing things. And they refocused themselves, and the priestly community became a much bigger deal after exile than it had been before. So things like sacrifices and personal commitment to justice and righteousness and those kinds of things became a much bigger element of society for the post-exile people who had returned back home. So it's very interesting, I think, how each portion of Israel responded to the situation of exile. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I read about even today, there's a group of people who are now actually call themselves Christians, but who are living kind of in that northern Iraq, maybe just over the border area, who trace their lineage back to some of these lost tribe, kind of this time period even, and see themselves as we are the tribe of, I don't know who they were, but, and recognize what God is still doing in them even to this day. And I think that's a cool testimony to what people recognize as like being exiled. That's a traumatic experience. That's hard to recover from as a nation, and the Northern Kingdom never did. But you see these pockets of people kind of throughout the ancient world who kind of revitalize their commitment to God and what God is doing through them. So I think that's very fascinating. But I want to take a look at 2 Kings with you. And just to get a sense of how these Assyrian policies and tactics, military tactics, played out in the biblical text itself. So we're going to start in 2 Kings chapter 15, starting at verse 17. And we're going to read good portions of the next 3 chapters or so. And it's going to be the same kind of process that we had last week with the Philistines, where I'll read a portion and then kind of open it up and say, what do we learn? Excuse me, man. What do we learn about the Assyrians through reading this text, and kind of how does that help us understand kind of especially the political mindset of some of these kings of Israel and Judah? So as we're reading, don't just be looking again for the theological angle, reading it from the perspective of Israel or Judah, but read it through the lens of what does this tell us about Assyria, about the political landscape at this time, about kind of some of the motivations of these Israelite kings. And what we're about to read is this scene right here, okay? This is the Siege of Lakeish. So if you look, let's see here, on the kind of closer in map of Israel, and towards the southern end in the yellow region, there are 2 battle scenes, one at Lakeish, one at Libnah. So this relief here is the depiction of the scene that happened at Lakeish. So Lakeish is kind of the last stronghold before the Assyrian army is able to head up into the hills into surrounding Jerusalem. So this will be kind of towards the end of our story. But this type of scene is what Assyria has the power to do. This is the threat that they pose to everyone and every king, especially, that they come into contact with. So with that in mind, let's read a little bit from 2 Kings chapter 15, starting at verse 17. So there's a lot of names going on here, and especially names that are like little pipsqueaks on the biblical timeline. These are probably names of kings that you haven't thought about for 20 years, and that's okay. But I don't want you to get confused by the names, so we'll stop and we'll say, okay, here's exactly what happened, and don't let yourself just get overwhelmed by this just random conglomeration of names. Because sometimes we read the Bible and we see those names and just like, yeah, whatever. And we'll just get to the next portion that's about theology. But here we're going to stop and slow down and see what's going on with these names. So, verse 17. In the 39th year of Azariah, the king of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king of Israel. So remember the name Menahem. He reigned in Samaria for 10 years. So Samaria is the northern kingdom, the capital city. And he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. Then Pul, who is Pul? Tiglath-Pileser. Tiglath-Pileser, this first king of the kind of resurgent Assyria, came and invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom. Menahem exacted this money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer. As for the other events of Menahem's reign, all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Menahem rested with his ancestors, and Pekahiah, his son, succeeded him as king. So what do we have going on in this first little section of this story? This is where it's okay for you to talk. Okay, so Menahem is a king in the northern kingdom, and he says, yes, Tiglath-Pileser, I will pay tribute to you. Okay? Did you notice what Tiglath-Pileser did as soon as he got tribute? He's like, all right, peace out. Thanks. See you next year. Okay? So Menahem is one of these kings who paid tribute to Tiglath-Pileser. We have at least two mentions of Menahem way back in Assyria. So on walls that look like these, but without all of the gruesome, gory details, we have just like records of so-and-so paid tax, so-and-so paid tribute, so-and-so did it, so-and-so did it. And we have Menahem's name of Samaria comes up 2 times. And one scholar said he paid this tribute of 1,000 shekels of silver was enormous for him. He calls it a breathtaking tribute of 1,000 talents of silver. So he says if 50 shekels per every wealthy citizen in Israel, he said they would have had to have 60,000 Israelites who contributed to this tax. 60,000 people are giving tribute from their own pockets, and not just like a little tax, but like a significant portion of their income in order for Tiglath-Pileser just to come and say, hey, I'm here, it's time to pay up. All right, we'll see you later. Just for the privilege of Tiglath-Pileser walking on by and coming back again next year. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move on. So we have next, verse 23, Pekahiah, king of Israel. In the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned for 2 years. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. One of his chief officers, though, Pekah, son of Remaliah, conspired against him, taking 50 men of Gilead with him, and he assassinated Pekahiah along with Argob and Ariah in the citadel of the royal palace at Samaria. So Pekah killed Pekahiah and succeeded him as king. The other events of Pekahiah's reign, all he did, are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. What happened here? What's that? We have an assassination, a good old assassination in the Old Testament, okay? Like, you're not doing a good enough job, I'd like to be king, so you only get 2 years as king. But that's not all going on in the story here, because, we have 2 years that Pekahiah is the king, and we don't really have anything recorded about him other than, he did bad. Okay? What's the last detail that we have recorded about Pekahiah or his lineage? From the previous thing that we just read, what did we read about his father? His father's giving tribute, right? And the very next thing we know, his father's dead, and 2 years later, Pekahiah's dead from someone within his own kind of circle of people. So, we can surmise that Pekah, who did the assassinating, did not like our foreign policy. Did not like, and we have extra biblical kind of reference to this, that Pekah was unhappy, and Pekah, along with 50 other fellows, was unhappy that we're paying tribute to Assyria. Because remember, Aram Damascus at this time has risen, and we've started conspiring behind the scenes with Aram Damascus to say, we're big enough. We don't need to pay tribute to Assyria. Let's get Pekahiah and that line of kings out, and we're going to come and stand against Assyria. So let's go forward. Pekah, king of Israel, verse 27. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, son of Remaliah, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned for 20 years. He again did evil in the eyes of the Lord, did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. In the time of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, so it's interesting that we have his full name there, whereas it's just Pul earlier. Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came to and took Ijon, Abel-Bet-Maachah, Janoah, Kadesh, and Hatzor. So these are all cities within the northern kingdom of Israel. So why has Tiglath-Pileser been alerted and come down and started sacking cities? The implication is we stopped paying tribute. So Tiglath-Pileser says there's a problem with that, okay? All right. He took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. So we already have deportations starting at this time, even before, we're not at 722 yet when everybody gets taken out. Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. He attacked and assassinated him and succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. As for all the other events, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Israel? What happened here? Say it again. We have another assassination, but there's juicy details in this assassination. All the way from Assyria, we have Tiglath-Pileser, who takes credit for this assassination and the installation of Hoshea as king and said, I had Pekah assassinated. I installed Hoshea as king of Samaria. So what's happening here on this international scene, remembering kind of those different levels of cooperation that we talked about? Yeah? You thought you could stand up against us, but here's what we do to people who stand up against us. You're not so far gone that we're just going to overthrow your whole government, but we are frustrated. You are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, sweetie. Instead, we're going to take out this leader, assassinate him just like he assassinated the guy before him, and we're going to pick our own leader who's definitely going to do the things that we call upon him to do. Little did they know at that time, Hoshea becomes the last king of Israel because he conspires against Assyria as well. So we'll read about that in just a moment. But Assyria is asserting its dominance and saying, no, you pay tribute to us, and if you don't, there are consequences to pay. There are cities that are going to get ransacked. There are kings that are going to get ousted, and all of these things. It's worth it to pay us to go away. That's just how life works right now. We're sorry we're big and you're small, but that's how it works, okay? So now what we're going to do is, so we've been telling the story of the northern kingdom of Israel. Now we're going to rewind the clock just a little bit and look at the southern kingdom of Judah. So when you're reading through Scripture, this might sound weird because Pekah has just been assassinated, but now Pekah shows back up in the story again, okay? So don't let that confuse you. All we're doing is the author is saying, here's north and what north is doing with Assyria. Now let's rewind the clock a little bit and say, here's south. Here's what the southern kingdom is doing. So skip down to chapter 16, and let's see what happens here in the southern kingdom. In the 17th year of Pekah, so here's Pekah again, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire. Why did he do that? He's following Canaanite religious practices, right? Not Yahweh's religious practices, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places on the hilltops and under every spreading tree. Then Rezin, king of Aram, okay, so Aram, this nation that is kind of feasting in the weakness of Assyria, Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, and they besieged Ahaz, but they could not overpower him. So what is happening here? Just so we're all on the same page. So Israel teamed up with Aram and went to war against Judah. Why might they have done that? Okay, so that's part of it. They're not part of the alliance. So Israel and Aram were part of an alliance that included at least 5 or 6 other little nations, Tyre, Sidon, those kinds of things, saying, we're not going to pay tribute to Assyria any longer. We're going to stand against Assyria. This is headed by Rezin and Pekah, who we know Pekah just assassinated a king because he was paying tribute. So now they come together and says, let's go get Judah. Let's besiege Jerusalem. What's the implication? What is Jerusalem doing? They're paying tribute to Tiglath-Pileser and Assyria. So they're like, no, we need to stand together. So they're trying to overthrow the king of Jerusalem so that they can install their own king in Jerusalem who will join their coalition and not pay tribute to Assyria. Okay? What a tangled web we are weaving at this moment, okay? You can see how it's easy to get lost in all of these details, but let's keep going. So they could not overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram by driving out the people of Judah. Edomites then moved into Elath and have lived there to this day. Ahaz sent messengers, got messengers out of the city to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and out of the king of Israel who are attacking me. So Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus, capturing it, and he deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin, the king of Aram, to death. So, what's happening here? Yeah, the king of Jerusalem, Ahaz, says, I am all alone in the world here right now. Please, Tiglath-Pileser, you're my only hope, right? Come and save me. I pay tribute to you. You owe this to me, bud. But also, here's an even bigger tribute. I've emptied the storerooms of the temple. Please come and save me from my neighbors to the north. Okay? So, what do we do with this? If you are Ahaz, king of Jerusalem, what are you supposed to do in this moment? Pray is a good option, right? Okay? What did you say? You stop worshiping Canaanite gods. Probably don't sacrifice your son in the fire, right? Yep. So the interesting thing is in Chronicles, he adds this little extra detail about Ahaz that says, yeah, he was buried in Jerusalem, but not with all the other kings. Like, he made this special note to say, like, we tolerated him, but okay. So if you are King Ahaz in Judah, Jerusalem, you are at a crossroads in your monarchy, right? You are at this moment where I can't do anything right. If I choose to go with Israel and Aram, I'm turning my back against Assyria, and they're going to squash me. If I turn to Assyria, I'm turning my back against my neighbors, and they're going to be very angry with me, and also God might squash me, okay? And that's what ends up happening. Turn over to Isaiah chapter 7, and the famous passage about the virgin birth. So, Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1, when Ahaz, son of Jotham, that's the same dude, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Have you heard that before? All right, so we're talking the same time of history here. Now, the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim, that's the northern kingdom, that's Samaria, so that the hearts of Ahaz and his people, they were shaken, as trees in the forest are shaken in the wind. So imagine that figurative language, like your heart is like, I don't know what to do in this moment. So the Lord said to Isaiah, the prophet at this time, go out and you and your son Shear-Jashub and meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Say to him, be careful, keep calm, don't be afraid. Don't lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood. Who are the smoldering stubs of firewood? Aram and Israel, northern kingdom of Israel, okay? Because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, northern kingdom, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, let us invade Judah. Let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves and take the son of Tabeel, king over it. So the son of Tabeel, that's an Egyptian king, okay? So we're wanting to take these two northern kingdoms, kill the king of Judah, and bring an Egyptian guy up to become king over Jerusalem because he will join our coalition and not pay tribute. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim, northern kingdom, will be shattered will be too shattered to even be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. If you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. What is God telling him to do? You've got to stand firm against this coalition, okay? So you can't give in to the coalition. So Ahaz probably is saying, does that mean I just give tribute to Assyria then, God? Okay. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or the highest heights. But Ahaz said, oh, no, I'm too holy for that. I could not put the Lord to a test. Isaiah just told you to. But Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough that you try the patience of humans? Will you also try the patience of my God? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. What? That doesn't sound like Christmas. What's going on here? So most scholars think that Ahaz probably had a virgin of some sort in his court, and Isaiah is looking at her and like, look, a virgin right there. She's going to give birth, and that'll be a sign to you. Emmanuel. What does Emmanuel mean? God is with us. Okay, this does not discount the possibility that Jesus is Emmanuel, okay? But most prophecies that we look at to have a far-reaching conclusion also have something very near that the people can like tangibly grab hold on. So Isaiah's telling him, watch this lady. She's going to give birth and have a son and name him God with us. That ought to be a sign to you that you can trust what God says, right? Ahaz, right? But let's see what he says next. Verse 15, he will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread, Aram and Israel, will be laid to waste. The Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah, and he will bring the king of Assyria. In that day, the Lord will whistle for flies from the Nile Delta in Egypt and for bees from the land of Assyria. They will all come in and settle in the steep ravines and the crevices and the rocks and the thorn bushes and the water holes. In that day, the Lord will use a razor hired from beyond the Euphrates River. Who's that? The king of Assyria, to shave your head and your private parts and cut off your beard also. In that day, a person will keep alive a young cow and 2 goats, and because of the abundance of milk they give, there will be curds to eat. All who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, every place where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 shekels, there will only be briars and thorns, and he goes on. So what's he saying about Assyria? If you trust in Assyria, what's happening? Assyria will bring about your own ruin. So don't trust Assyria. Don't give in to them. So you're Ahaz, and you're in a big pickle. Because I can't give in to Israel and Damascus, and I also can't give in to Assyria. So what do I do? And in the end, Ahaz makes the wrong decision, and he appeals to Tiglath-Pileser. And Tiglath-Pileser eventually is the one who comes, destroys the northern kingdom of Israel, marches down to the south, and does exactly what Isaiah said he would do. He puts the people, come on, maybe not. He puts the people up on tent pegs. He besieges the city of Lakeish. He besieges, this is actually Sennacherib eventually that besieges Lakeish and then up into Jerusalem. But they lay waste to the land of Judah. The land of, or the city of Jerusalem itself is not exiled until many years later in 586 BC. But the land of Judah is never the same. It never recovers from what Assyria does to it. Because eventually Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, Hezekiah rebels against Assyria. He does what God desires, and he stands firm. And we read in a couple of places in 2 Kings, in Isaiah, in 2 Chronicles, where Hezekiah is standing in this moment and has a similar decision to make to his father. Do I trust in external sources, in Egypt, in Assyria, in anyone, or do I stand firm and trust with God? And that's at that moment is when the angel of the Lord goes through the camp of Assyria and kills 185,000 people in one night. And Sennacherib turns tail and runs back to Assyria. So we mentioned that the annals of Assyria are selective in their history telling, and I've said this before, but Sennacherib in his annals tells all about this battle at Lakeish, tells all about the warpath they led up to the city of Jerusalem, tells all about how they had Hezekiah surrounded like a bird in its cage. And then he skips to the end and is like, and then we came back. We just came back for no reason. We just felt like it, okay? But we know that God is the one who came through. And as God gave Ahaz a test, like, look at that virgin and watch for the gift that she's about to give. He talks to Hezekiah in the same way, and Hezekiah comes through with a different response. Now, Hezekiah had his own problems. He opens up the storehouses and shows Merodach Baladan of Babylonia, because Babylonia is like, we need to form together to join a coalition against Assyria from both sides. And Ahaz is like, that sounds great. But in that one moment, Hezekiah does what God tells him to do. His downfall is he doesn't stay with that. He doesn't continue to trust God. But we know that even in the face of mighty obstacles like Assyria, who is on a warpath and who has all the destructive power in the world, there is one who stands strong, one who stands tall in the midst of all of that, and that is Yahweh himself, who always proves himself faithful and mighty over every god, every nation, everything that might come up against him. That's God. All right? Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. There's more to it. I didn't get to even half of my slides, but that's the way of it. So if you want to see what those are, come back next time, whenever that is. This is the siege ramp up to Lakeish. So Lakeish is this big hill right here under big piles of dirt. And this right here is the siege ramp that you can walk up today that shows you how the Assyrians eventually entered into the city of Lakeish and scaled the walls that no defense that the people of Israel had could stand up against Assyria, except for God himself. So blessings upon you. May God be with you as you go this week. And we'll see you guys next week. I promise I won't be here next week.